My name is Jack Sullivan, and I'm a game warden in the dense forests of northern Michigan. For 25 years, I've walked the line between wildlife protection and human recreation, managing conflicts between hunters, hikers, and the creatures that call these woods home. But there's one secret I've carried alone for a quarter century, one truth that would end my career, destroy my credibility, and possibly get me committed if I ever spoke it aloud in official company. There's something else in these forests. Something that doesn't appear in any field guide or wildlife census. Something that walks on two legs like a man, but moves with the predatory grace of a wolf. Something with intelligence that rivals, perhaps exceeds, human cognition. The locals call it Dogman. The old Odawa elders have other names for it. Names in languages that predate English. Names that carry respect rather than fear. And for 25 years, I've been its guardian, protector, and though it took me decades to understand, its student. It started in 1998, my second year as a warden. I was investigating illegal wolf traps in a remote section of the Huron National Forest when I found something caught in one of the traps. At first glance, my mind tried to categorize it as a large wolf, but wolves don't have hands. Wolves don't look at you with eyes that hold complex emotion and unmistakable comprehension. Wolves don't make sounds that feel like language even when you can't understand the words. The creature was injured, its leg broken by the trap's steel jaws, and it was dying. It should have attacked me, a predator wounded, cornered, in pain. Instead, it went still when I approached, watching with an intensity that felt like assessment, like it was deciding whether I was worth trusting. I made a choice that day that defined the next 25 years of my life. I freed it, splinted the leg with field supplies I carried for injured wildlife, left food and water, and returned every day for 3 weeks until it had healed enough to vanish back into the deep forest. I thought that was the end of it. A strange encounter, an animal I couldn't quite identify, a good deed done in wilderness where no one would ever know. I was wrong. That was the beginning of a relationship that would teach me more about humanity's place in the natural world than any textbook or training ever could. A relationship that would require me to become guardian, protector, and eventually, when it finally spoke, witness to truths our species desperately needs to hear. Last week, after 25 years of silent coexistence, it came to me in the night, and it spoke, not in words, but in something deeper than language. And what it told me about humans was devastating in its accuracy. After I freed the creature from that trap, I reported finding illegal snares to my supervisor and quietly removed every trap I could locate in that sector. The poachers were from downstate, trophy hunters looking for wolves to mount on their walls, a practice that disgusted me even before I knew what else walked these woods. I didn't see the creature again for 6 months. Then, one winter morning, I found a deer carcass placed deliberately on the hood of my patrol truck, not dumped or discarded, placed, with the choice cuts already removed, left for me like an offering, like payment. The tracks around my truck were unlike anything in my reference materials. Canine, yes, but the gait was wrong. Bipedal. The stride length suggested something over 7 feet tall, and the paw, hand, prints showed digit articulation that implied grasping capability. I took the venison home. It felt like accepting a contract I didn't fully understand. Over the following years, a pattern developed. I would find signs of the creature's presence, territorial markings that kept predators away from hiking trails, carcasses left for me during harsh winters, even tracks that suggested it shadowed me during patrols through dangerous sections of forest, as if providing protection. In return, I protected its territory. I rerouted hunters away from its range, citing wildlife sensitivity zones. I investigated every report of unusual activity with the deliberate inefficiency of someone making sure no evidence ever reached official channels. I removed trail cameras, sabotaged research projects that got too close, and built a reputation as the warden who was oddly protective of what locals started calling the dead zone, the section of forest where weird things happened and animals acted strange. You spend too much time in that sector, my supervisor told me after my 10th year. It's making you paranoid. People are starting to talk. Let them talk. I had a responsibility now, one that transcended my official duties. I began studying the creature's patterns with the attention of a behavioral scientist. It was solitary, or appeared to be. I never found evidence of others, though I couldn't rule out a small population. It hunted primarily at dawn and dusk, taking deer, elk, and occasionally smaller game. Its intelligence was evident in cached food supplies, in shelters built with structural sophistication, in what appeared to be medicinal plant usage near its dens. But the most striking evidence was the art. I found them on trees throughout its range. Carvings, not random scratches but deliberate images, representations of the forest, of prey animals, of the phases of the moon, and occasionally, hauntingly, images that showed the creature itself alongside what could only be humans, not in conflict, but in what looked like cooperation. The old Odawa elder, Joseph Makade, visited me after rumors about my obsession with the dead zone reached the reservation. He sat in my office, his weathered face unreadable, and asked a simple question. "You've seen it, haven't you? The Guardian." I couldn't lie to him. "Yes." "And you've chosen to protect it?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "My grandfather told me stories," said his grandfather told him, "going back generations. They've always been here, walking between worlds, part animal, part something else. They watch us, judge us, and when they find a human worthy, they teach." "Teach what?" "What we've forgotten about being part of this." He gestured toward the window, toward the forest beyond. "About balance, about respect, about living without destroying." He stood to leave, then paused. "It's a heavy responsibility being chosen, but it's also an honor. Remember that when it gets difficult." It got difficult around year 15. A wealthy hunting outfitter from Texas wanted to establish a wilderness experience resort right in the heart of the creature's territory. The proposal included luxury cabins, guided hunts, ATV trails, everything designed to maximize profit while destroying habitat. The county commissioners were salivating at the tax revenue. Environmental protests fell on deaf ears. I did something I'd never done before. I fabricated evidence of an endangered species in the proposed development area, gray wolves, which were still protected under federal law. I planted fur samples, created den sites, documented pack activity that would make development illegal without years of federal review. It worked. The development was blocked, but it cost me. An investigation into my methods found irregularities. I was nearly fired, saved only by my 2 decades of otherwise exemplary service. I was demoted, assigned to desk work, watched carefully for signs of further misconduct. I spent 2 miserable years pushing papers, reviewing permits, attending meetings, away from the forest, away from my patrol routes, away from the creature I'd sworn to protect. Then one evening, I came home to find my back door open. Nothing stolen, nothing disturbed. But on my kitchen table sat something that made my heart stop. A small carved figure unmistakably crafted by the same hands, paws, that had made the tree carvings. It depicted a human in a warden's uniform, standing protective in front of a creature that was part wolf, part man, part something else entirely. The message was clear. I know what you sacrificed. I'm grateful, and you're needed back in the forest. I requested transfer back to fieldwork the next morning. My supervisor, seeing something in my face that discouraged argument, approved it. Within a week, I was back on patrol, back in the forest, back in territory I'd left unprotected for too long, and I found devastation. During my absence, poachers had moved in. Not locals, professional hunters, possibly the same ones who'd set those traps decades ago, back for revenge on whatever large predator had been disrupting their operations. They'd set up a base camp deep in the forest equipped with night vision gear, tranquilizer guns, and cage traps designed for something much larger than a wolf. I found the creature 3 days later, caught in one of their snares. Not the same one from 25 years ago. This one was more sophisticated, more cruel. A cable snare designed to tighten when the victim struggled, slowly strangling rather than breaking limbs. The creature was barely conscious, its breathing labored, blood matting the fur around the noose. But when it saw me, those intelligent eyes focused with something I can only describe as relief. "I'm here," I said, knowing it could understand tone if not words. "I'm here, and I won't let them take you." I freed it from the snare, but the damage was severe. It needed medical attention beyond my field training. I made another choice that would define everything that followed. I loaded the creature into my truck, covered it with tarps, and drove it to the one person I thought might help. Joseph Makad opened his door at midnight, saw what I was carrying, and simply nodded. "Bring it inside, quickly." That night in an Odawa elder's living room, using a combination of modern veterinary medicine and traditional healing practices, we saved the creature's life. Joseph chanted in his ancestral language while I worked, his words seeming to calm the creature even as I cleaned wounds and administered antibiotics. "They taught us how to heal," Joseph said softly as we worked. "Centuries ago, when our people first came to these lands, they showed us which plants had medicine, which wounds needed fire and which needed cold. In return, we kept their secret, protected them from those who would hunt them. Why didn't you tell me? Because some knowledge must be earned through action, not given through words. You earned the knowledge by choosing protection over proof, by sacrificing your career without being asked. That proved you were worthy." The creature recovered over 2 weeks hidden in Joseph's barn, during which I systematically dismantled the poacher's operation. I called in every favor, every connection, every bit of leverage I'd accumulated over 20 years as a warden. The poachers were arrested on multiple federal violations. Their equipment was confiscated, and I made sure word spread through the hunting community. This territory was off limits, permanently, with consequences that went beyond legal penalties. When the creature finally returned to the forest, it paused at the tree line, looked back at me, and made a sound. Not growl, not bark, but something between them that carried unmistakable meaning. Gratitude, recognition, bond. I thought that would be our final interaction, that I'd done what needed to be done, the debt was paid, and we would return to our previous relationship of distant coexistence. I was wrong again, because that's when the teaching began. After the poacher incident, the creature, I'd started thinking of it simply as the guardian, adopting Joseph's terminology, began appearing more frequently, not threatening, never threatening, but present, as if it had decided I'd passed some test and was now ready for the next level of, what? Education? Initiation? It started with gifts. Not food anymore, but objects. Unusual stones, interesting pieces of driftwood, plants I didn't recognize. At first I cataloged them with my warden's training, trying to understand their significance scientifically. Joseph, visiting weekly now that our secret was shared, laughed at my attempts. "You're still thinking like a researcher. These aren't specimens to classify. They're communications. It's showing you what matters in its world. Pay attention not to what they are, but to why they were chosen." The stones, I realized, came from the forest's oldest sections, areas that had never been logged, where trees grew in patterns that suggested centuries of undisturbed development. The driftwood pieces showed water patterns, teaching me about the health of streams and rivers. The plants were all medicinal or edible, expanding my knowledge of what the forest provided. "It's teaching you to read the forest," Joseph confirmed, "not as something to manage or control, but as something to understand and respect." The lessons evolved. The guardian began leading me on what I came to think of as teaching walks. I'd be on patrol and suddenly feel its presence, not threatening, just nearby. If I followed the feeling, I'd find it waiting at the edge of a clearing or beside a distinctive tree. Then it would move deeper into forest, glancing back occasionally to ensure I followed. These walks taught me things no wildlife management course ever covered. How to move silently by reading the ground before placing each step. How to understand animal behavior by observing patterns in disturbed vegetation. How to predict weather by watching insect activity and plant responses. How to find water by following game trails at dusk. But more than practical skills, the guardian was teaching me perception. How to notice relationships rather than individual elements. How to understand the forest as an integrated system where everything affected everything else. How to recognize that I wasn't observing nature. I was part of it, and my presence changed what I was part of. This is what we lost, I told Joseph after a particularly profound teaching walk where I'd watched the guardian demonstrate how it cached food in ways that actually benefited other species. Its leftovers strategically placed to feed smaller predators, maintaining ecological balance. This systemic understanding, this integration, your people lost it, Joseph corrected gently. Indigenous peoples maintained it, but we've been pushed to the margins. Our knowledge dismissed as primitive. Meanwhile, your scientific approach dissects the forest into component parts and wonders why management strategies keep failing. He was right. I'd spent 20 years as a warden thinking I was protecting wildlife, but I'd been operating from a framework of separation. Humans over here, nature over there, with me as mediator. The guardian was showing me something different. Humans as participants in ecological systems, not managers of them. The teaching walks revealed something else too. The guardian wasn't alone. Not in the way I'd assumed with others of its kind, but in a deeper sense. It had relationships throughout the forest. Ravens that would alert it to danger. wolves that seemed to coordinate rather than compete with its hunting, even deer that incredibly didn't flee at its approach in certain contexts, as if they understood some complex protocol about when they were prey and when they were fellow inhabitants of shared territory. It's the alpha, I realized aloud during one of Joseph's visits. Not in the dominant sense, but in the ecological sense. A keystone species that maintains balance. Keystone consciousness, Joseph said. It understands its role in the web, acts from that understanding. Humans used to be the same, understanding ourselves as one strand in the web, important but not superior. That's the teaching. That's what it wants you to remember. The relationship deepened in year 23. I'd been tracking a black bear that had gotten into conflict with campers, trying to relocate it before someone decided to shoot it. The bear was defensive, aggressive, increasingly dangerous as human encounters escalated its stress. I found the guardian and the bear together in a clearing, and what I witnessed challenged everything I thought I knew about interspecies communication. The guardian was negotiating. The two were exchanging vocalizations, body language, even what looked like physical demonstrations of territory boundaries. The bear would approach in one direction. The guardian would make a sound and gesture differently. The bear would alter course. After 20 minutes, the bear simply left, walked away from the direction of the campground, deeper into forest where human conflict would be unlikely. The guardian watched it go, then looked at me and made a gesture I'd learned meant observe and learn. It mediated, I breathed. It actively managed an ecological conflict using communication. That's when I understood the full scope of what the guardian was. Not just an intelligent predator living in the forest, but a conscious participant in ecological stewardship. It understood the web and actively maintained it, intervening when necessary to preserve balance, and it was trying to teach me to do the same. Over the next 2 years, my work as a warden transformed. I stopped thinking about wildlife management and started thinking about ecological facilitation. Instead of enforcing rules based on human convenience, I enforced boundaries based on ecological necessity. I learned to mediate conflicts not by removing animals, but by understanding the systemic causes of conflict and addressing those. My success rate improved dramatically. Deer populations stabilized without controversial culling programs. Bear encounters dropped without aggressive relocation. Even the contentious wolf issue found balance when I started applying the guardian's principle. Understand what each species needs, facilitate space for those needs, intervene only when the system itself is disrupted. My supervisors noticed. Whatever you're doing differently, it's working, my director said during a rare compliment. Other wardens should learn from you, if they only knew who I was learning from. But the teaching was building towards something. I could feel it in the increasing urgency of the guardian's communications, in the way Joseph had started spending more time at my cabin, teaching me Ottawa phrases and concepts I'd need for what's coming. It's going to speak to you, Joseph said one evening. Not just communicate, speak. Share understanding that can't be conveyed through demonstration. Are you ready? How do you know? Because that's how it always works. 25 years is one generation in their timekeeping. It's been evaluating you that entire time. Now it needs to know, can you carry what it has to say? Can you translate its understanding into terms your people might hear? Why me? Why not you, or another elder who already understands this? Joseph smiled sadly. Because our people have always known. We don't need convincing. But your people? The ones destroying the forest while claiming to protect it? The ones measuring success in board feet and tourist dollars? They need to hear it from one of their own. Someone who speaks their language, understands their thinking, but has learned a different way. What if I fail? What if I can't translate it? Then it will try with someone else. But time is running out, Jack. The forest is shrinking. The balance is breaking. Your species' disconnection is accelerating toward a tipping point. So it's taking a risk. The same risk indigenous peoples took centuries ago when we first tried to share this knowledge with European settlers, probably with similar results. But the crisis is urgent enough that the attempt must be made. That was 3 weeks ago. Last week, on the 25th anniversary of the day I first freed it from that trap, the guardian came to me, and it spoke. It was a moonless night. The forest wrapped in darkness so complete that even my night-adjusted eyes could barely distinguish shapes. I was on my porch, unable to sleep, feeling the weight of Joseph's prediction like an approaching storm. Then I felt it. Presence. Watching. Waiting. I stood slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I'm here, I said softly. I'm listening. The Guardian emerged from the tree line, moving with that fluid grace that still, after 25 years, caught my breath. It was massive, close to 8 feet tall, broader than any human, with proportions that spoke of both canine and something else. Its eyes caught what little ambient light existed, glowing faintly amber. It approached to within 10 feet of the porch, close enough that I could smell it, musk and forest loam and something wild that made my hindbrain remember when humans were prey. But I held my ground, trusting 25 years of relationship. The Guardian sat back on its haunches, a gesture I'd learned meant long communication coming. Then it began, not with words. Its vocal apparatus couldn't form human speech, but with something deeper, a combination of vocalization, gesture, and something else I can only describe as projected meaning, as if it was reaching directly into my mind, bypassing language entirely, communicating in pure concept and emotion, and I understood. The first thing it showed me was perspective, how it saw humans, not as individuals but as a species, observed across generations. My lifetime was a moment in its people's long watching. It had seen humans arrive in these forests, had watched us change from individuals who understood integration to masses who practiced separation. It showed me through images that formed in my mind. Early humans moving through the forest with awareness, taking what they needed, leaving space for others. Those humans had known the Guardian's kind existed and had treated them with respect, as fellow beings with territory, needs, agency. Then the change, humans multiplying, claiming ownership rather than participation, cutting vast sections of forest, not for need but for profit, disrupting migration routes, fragmenting habitat, taking and taking and taking without any understanding that the web they were shredding included themselves. The Guardian's communication carried grief, profound, ancient grief, for what humans had become, for what we'd lost about ourselves. It showed me how its kind had adapted, retreating deeper, hiding more carefully, surviving in the shrinking spaces between human awareness. But adaptation had limits. Their range was now a fraction of what it had been. Their numbers had dwindled, not from predation or disease, but from habitat loss and fragmentation caused by a species that couldn't see the consequences of its actions. But the grief wasn't just for its kind. The Guardian showed me something that made my chest tighten with recognition. It grieved for us, for humans, for what our disconnection had done to us. It showed me through sensory memory how humans moved through the forest now versus centuries ago. Then, alert, aware, present, reading signs and patterns with sophisticated understanding. Now, distracted, oblivious, experiencing the forest through camera screens rather than direct perception, so disconnected from their own bodies, they needed maps to navigate terrain their ancestors could have traveled by instinct. It showed me human children then and now. Then, playing in streams, building with sticks, learning plant names and animal behaviors through direct experience. Now, inside, staring at screens, their bodies sedentary, their minds engaged with virtual environments while real wilderness existed just outside. It showed me human health then and now. Then, strong, integrated, occasionally dying young, but living fully while alive. Now, technically living longer but spiritually dying, epidemic depression, anxiety, physical ailments that stemmed from sedentary indoor lives, pharmaceutical dependence to manage conditions caused by disconnection from natural rhythms. The Guardian's message became painfully clear. You're killing yourselves along with everything else, and you don't even know you're sick. It showed me how it had tried to understand, watching humans across generations trying to grasp why a species would choose this self-destruction, and it had reached a conclusion that it needed to share, that it had chosen me to carry. Humans weren't inherently destructive. They were traumatized. The communication shifted to something like analysis. Humans had separated from the natural world, not from malice, but from fear. Fear of death, of discomfort, of being part of a cycle that included suffering and loss. So we'd tried to transcend nature, to control it, to make ourselves separate from and superior to the very systems that sustained us. But transcendence through separation was impossible. We were biological beings dependent on air and water and food chains and ecological balance. Our attempt to escape nature had just created a different prison, artificial environments that met our physical needs while starving our psychological and spiritual ones. The Guardian showed me humans in their habitat, offices, cars, apartments, Controlled temperature, controlled light, controlled sound. Safe from predators and weather and discomfort, but also isolated from everything that made consciousness feel alive, from seasons and weather, from other species, from natural rhythms, from the full sensory experience of being embodied in a living world. You built cages and called them civilization, and now you're too afraid to leave them even as they make you sick. The communication became more urgent. The Guardian showed me ecological tipping points, forests reaching thresholds beyond which they couldn't recover, systems collapsing, the web unraveling, not in some distant future, now, accelerating. And it showed me humans responding to these crises with the same thinking that created them. More control, more technology, more attempts to manage rather than participate, building walls against rising seas instead of understanding why seas were rising, engineering crops resistant to climate change instead of addressing climate change, solving symptoms while ignoring causes. You cannot control your way out of a crisis caused by attempting control. Then the Guardian showed me something else. Memory of humans who'd understood integration, indigenous peoples who'd maintained relationship with its kind across centuries, who'd known the Guardian's people existed, but never tried to prove or expose them, who'd practiced genuine coexistence rather than documented observation. It showed me those humans teaching children to hunt with gratitude, to take only what was needed, to understand themselves as participants in food webs rather than consumers of resources. It showed me ceremonies that maintained relationship between human and non-human worlds, that acknowledged interdependence rather than independence. Your people knew this once. Your people lived this once. You can remember. But then it showed me the erasure. Those peoples and their knowledge marginalized, dismissed, actively suppressed by the dominant culture that valued extraction over integration. The knowledge surviving only at the margins, kept by people like Joseph, while the mainstream culture doubled down on separation. The Guardian's communication carried something I interpreted as urgency. Time is running out. The web is tearing. If humans don't remember integration soon, the collapse will take you with everything else. We can survive in fragments, in remnants. You cannot. Your species needs the web intact far more than we do. It showed me a choice point. Humanity could continue on its current trajectory. More separation, more control, more technological solutions to problems caused by separation, and face cascading collapse. Or humanity could choose reconnection, reintegration, remembering that we were never separate from nature in the first place. This is not environmental conservation. This is your survival. The forest will persist in some form. But will you? The Guardian stood then, and its communication shifted to something direct and personal. You've proven trustworthy. You've learned to see what I see. Now you must translate. Tell your people what they've forgotten. Tell them before they forget so completely that memory is impossible. They won't listen, I said, my voice rough with emotion. I'm just a game warden. I have no platform, no authority, no way to reach. The Guardian made a sound that stopped my protests. Its meaning was clear. I'm not asking you to save them. I'm asking you to tell the truth. What they do with it is their choice. But they must be given the choice. It reached out one massive paw, hand, and placed it on my chest, over my heart. The gesture felt like consecration, like blessing, like the transfer of responsibility I'd been avoiding acknowledging. Then it showed me one final thing, my father, not through memory I possessed, but through its own memory. My father, who'd been a logger in these same forests 60 years ago. My father, who'd had an encounter I'd never known about, who'd seen the Guardian's kind and chosen silence over profit, who'd quietly changed careers, become a forest advocate, spent his later years fighting the same clear-cutting operations he'd once participated in. He saw us too. He chose protection. This runs in your blood. You were chosen long before you thought you chose. The revelation broke something open in me. I'd thought my connection to the forest, my dedication to protection was my own choice. But I'd inherited it, carried it forward, continued a legacy I hadn't known existed. Tell me what to say, I whispered. How do I translate this so they'll hear it? The Guardian's response was simple. Tell them they're animals who forgot they're animals, and forgetting is killing them. Everything else follows from that. Then it released me, stepped back, and with one final look that held millennia of patient watching, it vanished into the forest. I stood on my porch until dawn, integrating what had been shared, and understanding that my life had just been divided into before and after, before understanding the full scope of human crisis. After being charged with speaking truth, most people didn't want to hear. Joseph arrived at sunrise, as if he'd known the exact moment I would need him. "It spoke," I said. "Yes. And now I have to find a way to carry what it shared." "Yes. I don't know how." Joseph smiled gently. "You start by telling me, and then you tell others, one at a time, until the message spreads. That's how all truth travels. Not through broadcast, but through relationship." So I told him everything, and in the telling, I began to understand how to translate concept into language, vision into words. This is me continuing that work. This is me honoring the Guardian's request. This is me telling the truth, whether you're ready to hear it or not. The morning after the Guardian spoke to me, I called in sick for the first time in 15 years. I needed time to process, to integrate, to figure out what I was supposed to do with the message I'd been given. Joseph stayed, making coffee, sitting in patient silence while I worked through the revelation. Finally, he spoke. "You're wondering how to prove what you experienced. How to provide evidence that will make people believe. Isn't that necessary? Without proof, you have testimony, which is how humans shared wisdom for hundreds of thousands of years, before we decided that only measurable, repeatable data was valid. But modern people won't accept testimony without evidence. Modern people accept testimony all the time. They just call it different things: expert opinion, personal experience, witness accounts. The real question isn't whether they'll accept testimony. It's whether your testimony challenges assumptions they're invested in maintaining." He was right. I could testify about wildlife behavior all day, and people would accept it based on my credentials. But testify about an undocumented species that had complex thoughts about human civilization? That challenged too much. So how do I share this without being dismissed as delusional? Joseph sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You don't lead with the Guardian. You lead with the message. The message stands independent of the messenger. Talk about human disconnection from nature, about how that disconnection is making us sick, about how indigenous wisdom has been saying this for centuries. The Guardian's existence is secondary to the Guardian's observations. But the observations have more weight if people know they come from an intelligent, non-human perspective. Do they? Or does revealing the source just shift the conversation from the message to endless debate about whether the source exists? You've been a warden for 27 years. You've observed the same patterns the Guardian has. You can speak with your own authority about what humans have lost. It was strategic truth-telling. Share the wisdom without necessarily revealing its origin. At least not initially. At least not until people were ready to hear the larger revelation. But even that path was fraught with professional peril. I'd already been demoted once for fabricating evidence to protect the Guardian's territory. If I started publicly advocating for radical changes in how humans relate to nature, citing observations that challenged standard wildlife management protocols, I'd likely be fired. Then be fired. Joseph said bluntly when I voiced this concern. "What's your career worth if you can't use it to serve truth? You're 53. You could take early retirement, work independently. You don't need institutional affiliation to speak. But institutional affiliation gives credibility to people who value institutions over truth. Those aren't your audience anyway. Your audience is people who already feel the disconnection, who sense something's wrong with how we're living but don't have language for it. Those people don't need you to have credentials. They need you to confirm what they're already experiencing." I spent the next week experimenting with different approaches. I wrote an article about wildlife management and ecological integration, submitted it to professional journals. Rejection after rejection. Too philosophical, not enough data. Claims not supported by cited research. Methodology unclear. I tried a different venue, a blog about rewilding human consciousness. I posted my first essay about how modern humans had become disconnected from natural rhythms and what that disconnection cost us psychologically and physically. Expected silence. Instead, within a week, 300 comments. People sharing their own experiences of disconnection, their hunger for something different, their sense that modern life was fundamentally misaligned with human well-being. "There's an audience," I told Joseph. "People are starving for this message." Of course they are. The sickness recognizes the medicine, even when the conscious mind resists it. But the blog also attracted criticism. Wildlife management colleagues accusing me of abandoning science for mysticism. Hunters angry about my increasing restrictions on their access to certain territories. And, disturbingly, a few people who seemed very interested in exactly which territories I was protecting and why. "You're attracting attention," My supervisor warned during a tense meeting. The wrong kind of attention. People are asking questions about your management practices, about why certain areas are off limits, about what you're really doing out there during your patrols. I'm doing my job, protecting wildlife. Are you? Or are you protecting something else? He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Jack, you're a good warden. You've always been dedicated. But lately, people think you've gone native, that you've spent so much time alone in those woods that you've lost perspective. What if their perspective is too narrow? What if there are things in that forest that don't fit conventional wildlife categories but still deserve protection? The question hung in the air between us. He wanted to dismiss it, I could see that. But something in my tone, some certainty earned through 25 years of direct experience, gave him pause. If such things existed, he said carefully, official documentation would be required. Research protocols, scientific validation. You understand that, right? You can't just unilaterally decide something deserves protection without following proper channels. And if following proper channels would destroy what needs protecting, then you have a choice to make about which you value more, your career or your convictions. The conversation ended there, but the ultimatum was clear. I was being watched. Any more irregularities, any more unauthorized territorial restrictions, any more evidence of prioritizing personal beliefs over policy, and I'd be terminated. I discussed this with Joseph that evening. They're closing in. If I keep protecting the territory, I'll lose my job. But if I stop, the Guardian becomes vulnerable to whoever comes next. So train someone, Joseph said simply. Find a younger warden, someone with integrity, and pass the responsibility forward. You're not the only one who can do this work, but I'm the only one who's had 25 years of relationship with the Guardian? Yes, but others can learn. Others can step into protection without needing the full revelation. You did it yourself for years before the Guardian spoke to you. You protected because it felt right, because you recognized intelligence deserving respect. Others can do the same. He was suggesting succession planning for a secret conservation project protecting an undocumented species. The absurdity would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so serious. There's a young warden, I said slowly. Maya Torres, recent transfer from down south. She's different. Approaches the work with more respect than ego. I've watched her with wildlife. She sees them as beings, not just resources to manage. Then test her. See if she's ready to understand what really needs protecting here. The question was how to test without revealing too much. I couldn't just say, there's a large predatory cryptid in the forest, and I need you to help hide it from science. But I could present scenarios, observe her responses, see if she had the ethical framework and ecological understanding required. Over the next month, I brought Maya into increasingly sensitive situations. A black bear that locals wanted destroyed. I gave her the choice of lethal removal or territorial mediation. She chose mediation, spending 3 weeks systematically changing human behavior patterns to eliminate conflict, rather than eliminating the bear. A wealthy developer wanting to build on prime habitat. I asked her opinion on whether we should approve or obstruct. She argued passionately for obstruction, citing not just policy, but ethical responsibility to non-human stakeholders. An illegal hunting operation. I let her lead the investigation and watched her go far beyond just arresting the poachers. She tracked down their entire network, identified who was buying the products, and helped build a case that dismantled the operation from root to branch. She's got the right instincts, I told Joseph. But instincts aren't enough. She needs to understand the paradigm, that we're part of the web, not managers of it, that some things deserve protection specifically because they challenge our categories. Then tell her about the Guardian. That could end her career before it starts. If she reports it, then she wasn't ready. But if she understands it, embraces it, chooses protection, then you've found your successor. The risk is worth it. I wrestled with the decision for days. Finally, I invited Maya to accompany me on a patrol into the Guardian's territory, deep into the dead zone that other wardens had learned to avoid. We were 3 hours in when she stopped suddenly. Jack, something's following us. Big. Staying parallel to our path. I know. You know? Shouldn't we just keep walking? It's not a threat. She gave me a look that combined confusion and concern. What is it? Something that's been in these woods longer than humans have kept records. Something intelligent. Something that deserves to live without being studied, documented, or exposed. Maya stopped walking. You're serious? Completely. You've made contact with something? 25 years ago. and I've been protecting it ever since, at the cost of career advancement, credibility, and nearly my job. Because some things are more important than proving we're right. Some things are more important than scientific discovery. Some relationships require secrecy, not disclosure. She processed this for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly working through implications. This is why certain territories are off limits, why you've blocked development, why you've been so different from other wardens. Yes, and you're telling me because I need someone else who understands. Someone who can continue the protection when I can't anymore. Someone with the integrity to choose what's right over what's credible. Maya looked into the forest in the direction of the presence we both felt. I want to see it. That's not my choice to make. It reveals itself if and when it chooses. All I can do is introduce you to the concept, to the responsibility. The relationship has to develop on its own. But you believe it's there. You've seen it, interacted with it, for 25 years. She took a deep breath. Okay, tell me what I need to know. How to protect it. How to continue what you've started. And in that moment I knew Joseph had been right. The responsibility could be shared. The work could continue beyond my career, my life. Some secrets could be passed to the worthy. And Maya Torres, standing in that forest, choosing truth over comfort, was worthy. Training Maya in guardian protection was like teaching someone to see in the dark. Not by explaining what light was, but by helping them develop different senses. Over the following months, I brought her deeper into the work, showed her the territorial markers, taught her to read the signs of the guardian's presence, explained the delicate balance we maintained between protection and exposure. The hardest part, I told her during a night patrol, isn't hiding the guardian from others. It's fighting your own trained impulses to document, to prove, to share discoveries. Everything in your education tells you that finding something unknown means making it known. But that impulse serves science, not wisdom. So we just keep it secret? Forever? Maya asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer was more complex. We keep it secret until humanity is capable of encountering it with respect rather than objectification. Which means we keep it secret because that capability doesn't exist yet, may never exist. We sat in silence, watching the forest, and then Maya spoke quietly. I felt it yesterday, during my solo patrol in the northern sector. I didn't see anything, but I knew I wasn't alone. Knew I was being observed and evaluated. What did you do? I talked to it. Felt ridiculous doing it, but I explained who I was, why I was there, that I wanted to honor whatever called this place home. Then I left something, some of my lunch, jerky and trail mix at the base of a tree, like an offering. I smiled. The guardian appreciates respect shown through gesture as much as words. You did well. Do you think it understood? I know it did. And I know it's been watching you since Jack brought you into this, deciding whether you're trustworthy. Maya's eyes widened. You're not just teaching me to protect it. You're introducing us? The relationship decides itself. I'm just facilitating the possibility. Over the next weeks, Maya reported increasingly direct encounters, finding food left for her after difficult patrols, discovering that the trail she was walking had been recently cleared of dangerous deadfall, sensing presence during her moments of deepest uncertainty in the forest, always protective, never threatening. It's incredible, she said one evening at my cabin, her professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine wonder. Everything we're taught about wildlife behavior, about predator psychology, about animal cognition, it's all inadequate for this. The guardian operates on a completely different level, because it's not wildlife, I said. Not in the way we categorize things, it's people. Different people, yes, but people. With culture and ethics and complex thought. Have you told anyone else? Besides Joseph and me? No. The fewer people who know, the safer it is. But Jack, Maya leaned forward, intensity in her eyes. What if there are others? Other cryptids, other undocumented species? What if there's an entire hidden world we're ignoring because our paradigm says it can't exist? The question hung in the air, because I'd wondered the same thing. Had the Guardian's kind been the only species to escape documentation? Or were there others, equally intelligent, equally deserving of protection? I don't know, I admitted. But I know that even asking the question publicly would trigger the exact response we're trying to prevent. Invasive research, aggressive documentation, the destruction of privacy through forced exposure. Maya nodded slowly, understanding the ethical trap. Then, The Guardian spoke to you, told you things about humans. Are you going to share what it said? I've been trying, through the blog, through conversations with people like you. But translating nonverbal communication into language always loses nuance, and the message is uncomfortable, that we're sick with disconnection, that our civilization is fundamentally misaligned with our nature. People don't want to hear that. No, they want to hear that technology will solve everything, that we can have our separated artificial lives and still be healthy, that the anxiety and depression and physical illness plaguing modern populations is just bad luck, random, not systemic consequences of how we're living. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, what if we documented the effects without mentioning the source? Studied human health outcomes correlated with time in wilderness, with disconnection from screens, with return to natural rhythms? Scientific proof that reconnection is medicine? That research exists. Extensive research. But it gets marginalized because the implications are too challenging to economic systems built on keeping people indoors, consuming, separated from free sources of well-being, like nature and community. So we're trapped, knowing truth that can't be shared, because the systems that control information distribution are invested in maintaining the status quo. Welcome to the burden of seeing clearly, I said. This is what The Guardian meant when it showed me that indigenous peoples have been trying to tell these truths for centuries. The knowledge is out there. The wisdom is available. But dominant culture actively suppresses it, because accepting it would require transformation that threatens power structures. Maya stood, pacing my small cabin. This is bigger than protecting one creature. This is about protecting knowledge that could heal our species. Yes, but protecting it requires secrecy, because premature exposure would destroy it. It's the same paradox. The truth that could save us can't be forced on us. We have to choose to receive it. And that choice requires readiness most people haven't developed. So what do we do? What we're doing. Protect the Guardian and its territory. Share the wisdom where we can, with people ready to hear it. Plant seeds. Trust that even if we don't see the harvest, the seeds will grow. Maya stopped pacing, looking at me with an expression that mixed frustration and determination. Jack, you're 53. Let's say you have 20 good years left. I'm 31. I have maybe 40. Even if we both dedicate our lives to this, that's just 2 people. 3 if we count Joseph carrying this knowledge for a combined century. Against technological advancement that's accelerating. Against habitat loss that's accelerating. Against systems that have trillions of dollars invested in maintaining human disconnection. Yes, those aren't good odds. No, but they're the only odds we have. The Guardian chose to speak after 25 years of relationship. That suggests patience measured in decades, not days. We're not trying to save the world in our lifetimes. We're trying to maintain the possibility of wisdom surviving until humanity is ready to receive it. And if humanity is never ready, then at least the Guardian's people will know that some humans tried, that not all of us were blind to what we were destroying. That matters too. Being witnessed, being honored, being recognized, even in ending. The darkness of that statement settled over us. But before despair could take root, we heard something. A vocalization from the forest. Low, modulated, unmistakable. Maya's eyes went wide. Is that the Guardian calling? For you, I think. What do I do? You answer the call. Go out there. Be present. Let the relationship develop on its terms, not yours. Maya stood, grabbed her jacket, then paused at the door. Jack, if something happens to me, if I don't come back, you'll come back. The Guardian doesn't harm those who approach with respect. But you won't be the same when you return. That's the real risk. Not physical danger, but transformation. Being changed by direct encounter with intelligence that sees through all your civilized pretenses to the animal beneath. I think I'm ready for that. No one's ready for that. But some of us are willing anyway. Go. She left. And I watched from the porch as she walked into darkness, toward a presence that would teach her in one night what had taken me years to understand through gradual revelation. Joseph appeared from the shadows. I hadn't heard him approach, but I'd learned he had a way of showing up exactly when his presence was needed. She's young, he observed. Strong. She'll carry this forward when you can't. If the Guardian accepts her. It already has. That call was approval, not evaluation. She passed the test when she left that offering, when she spoke with respect rather than scientific curiosity. The Guardian recognizes genuine relationship. It's been searching for decades for someone beyond you to trust. Maya might be that someone, and if she's not, then we keep searching. But Jack, Joseph sat beside me on the porch steps. You need to prepare for something. The Guardian is old, probably older than me, and I'm 78. Its people live longer than humans, but not infinitely. You might be maintaining this protection for a being that's nearing the end of its natural lifespan. The thought hadn't occurred to me. I'd somehow assumed the Guardian would always be there, eternal as the forest itself. But of course it wasn't. It was mortal, biological, subject to the same cycles of birth and death as everything else. How do you know? I've seen the signs. Slower movement, more caution. The way it's investing in relationship building now after years of distance. That's succession behavior. It's preparing for transition, making sure the knowledge continues beyond its individual existence. Then all of this, teaching me, speaking to me, accepting Maya, that's a dying being's final gift. Yes, the urgency you felt, the sense that time is running out, that's not about civilization's trajectory. That's about the Guardian's timeline. It needed to share what it knew before it couldn't anymore. I sat with that revelation, grief welling up for a being I'd never touched in casual affection, had barely spoken to in conventional terms, but who had become the defining relationship of my adult life. How long? Years. Maybe a decade. But not forever. Which means the work is even more urgent. The wisdom has to be transmitted, encoded, passed to enough carriers that it survives beyond the Guardian's life. We sat in silence until Maya returned 3 hours later. She was crying, not from fear or trauma, but from the overwhelming emotional weight of direct contact with intelligence that saw her completely, accepted her wholly, and asked only that she continue what others had started. It touched me, she said, her voice shaking, reached out one massive paw and placed it over my heart, and I felt everything. Its grief for what humans have become, its hope that we might remember, its knowledge that it's dying and that this message has to continue beyond its death. She looked at me, tears streaming. Jack, it's counting on us, on me, to carry this forward, to keep protecting not just its body but its message. Can I do that? Am I strong enough? I stood and placed my hand over her heart, echoing the Guardian's gesture. You're strong enough, and you're not alone. We carry it together. Joseph added his hand to ours. 3 carriers, 3 generations of protection. That's how knowledge survives. And in that moment, standing on my porch in the forest darkness, I understood what the Guardian had been building. Not just protection for itself, but a lineage of human protectors who would carry its wisdom forward long after it was gone. Some legacies were genetic, others were chosen. This was a chosen legacy, and we had accepted it. Word of my blog had spread further than I'd anticipated. 6 months after Maya's initiation, I received an email from a documentary producer in Seattle. They wanted to interview me about rewilding human consciousness and alternative approaches to wildlife management. I discussed it with Joseph and Maya. It could be an opportunity, Maya argued, to share the message with a wider audience, or it could expose us to scrutiny we can't afford, I countered. Start asking why I'm so passionate about this. Investigate my management practices. Discover protected territories that don't have official explanation. Joseph was characteristically direct. What would the Guardian want? Good question. The Guardian had asked me to share its observations about human disconnection, but it had also shown me the cost of premature exposure, the way forced revelation destroyed what it was meant to illuminate. I compromised. I agreed to the interview but insisted on editorial control over what was included. The producer agreed, probably thinking I was just another paranoid source. The interview took place at my cabin, which immediately created complications. The cameraman kept commenting on how remote the location was, how pristine the forest, how unusual it was to find such undeveloped territory so close to recreational areas. You've done an amazing job protecting this ecosystem, the producer said. Her journalist instincts clearly piqued. What's your secret? No secret. Just consistent enforcement of regulations and helping people understand that some places deserve to be left wild. But there must be pressure to develop. This area could be highly profitable for tourism, logging, resource extraction. There's always pressure. My job is to be better at resisting pressure than developers are at applying it. The interview itself went well. I talked about human disconnection from nature, about how modern life had separated us from natural rhythms and relationships, about the psychological and physical cost of that separation. I cited research about nature exposure and mental health, about the benefits of unstructured outdoor play for children, about how indigenous wisdom had been saying these things for centuries. "You sound almost spiritual about this," the producer observed. "More like a priest than a scientist." Maybe the distinction between spiritual and scientific is part of the problem. Indigenous peoples didn't separate ecology from spirituality because they understood them as the same thing, relationships that sustained life. We've tried to make everything mechanical, measurable, controllable, and in doing so, we've lost the awe, the respect, the humility that comes from recognizing we're part of something larger than ourselves. She leaned forward. "Have you had a transformative experience? Something that changed how you see all this?" The question was a trap. Answer yes, and she'd press for details. Answer no, and I'd seem like a theorist rather than a practitioner. "I've had 27 years of daily experience in these forests. That's transformative through accumulation. You walk the same territory for decades, you start to see patterns, relationships, intelligence in how ecosystems self-organize. It changes you. But was there a moment? A specific encounter? I thought about the Guardian, about 25 years of relationship that had culminated in direct communication, about the weight of knowledge I couldn't share. Every day in the forest is an encounter with something beyond human categories, whether people recognize it or not." The interview ended there, the producer clearly sensing I was holding something back but unable to extract it. The documentary aired 3 months later. It was popular, surprisingly popular. My segment was only 15 minutes of a feature-length film about human disconnection from nature, but it resonated. My blog traffic increased tenfold. I started receiving emails from people around the country, teachers wanting to bring more outdoor education into schools, parents concerned about their children's screen addiction, therapists interested in nature-based healing modalities. But I also received attention from people I'd have preferred to avoid. Hunting organizations angry about my restrictions on their access, logging companies questioning my authority to block development, and, most concerning, cryptozoologists who'd somehow connected my passion for preservation with rumors about unusual activity in my jurisdiction. One email was particularly troubling. "I've been researching Michigan Dogman sightings for 15 years. Your territory has the highest concentration of credible reports, yet you've been systematically blocking access and investigation. What are you hiding?" Maya and I discussed the implications over coffee at my cabin. "They're getting close," she said. "If they start seriously investigating, they'll find evidence. Trail cameras might capture something. Thermal imaging could detect heat signatures. Modern technology makes hiding almost impossible. Then we adapt. The Guardian has been adapting to human technology for centuries. We can too. But adaptation was getting harder. The cryptozoologists started showing up in local bars, interviewing people, building a case that something unusual was being actively suppressed. He filed FOIA requests for my incident reports, my management decisions, my territorial restrictions. My supervisor called me in for another uncomfortable meeting. "Jack, I've got a persistent researcher asking why you've blocked 17 different survey attempts in the past decade. He's making accusations about suppressed evidence, about you protecting something you're not authorized to protect." "I'm protecting sensitive habitat. That's literally my job description." He's threatening to go to media, to accuse the Forest Service of covering up significant cryptozoological evidence. Even if it's nonsense, it creates publicity we don't need. "So what are you asking me to do? Let them survey. Let them put up their cameras and do their thermal imaging and collect their environmental DNA samples. Then when they find nothing, because there's nothing to find, they'll go away, and we can all move on." It was impossible to explain that there was something to find, but that finding it would destroy it. That exposure wasn't discovery, but violation. That some knowledge couldn't be forced without being fundamentally changed. "Give me 30 days, I said, to prepare the territory for minimal impact survey. Then they can do their investigation under my supervision." He agreed, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. He thought I was stalling. In reality, I was preparing. That night I went to the Guardian's territory. Maya accompanied me, along with Joseph. We built a fire and waited. The Guardian appeared after midnight, and somehow, without words, I communicated the situation. Researchers were coming, technology was advancing, hiding was becoming impossible. The Guardian's response was unexpected. Acceptance. Not defeat, acceptance. It had known this moment would come, had been preparing for it, and it had a request. Through projected meaning, it showed me. If discovery was inevitable, let it happen on terms that preserved dignity. Let me be the one who discovered and documented it, who could control the narrative, who could frame the revelation as a call for protection rather than spectacle. You've earned trust. Use it to protect even in exposure. That's the final test. You want me to reveal you? After 25 years of protection, I want you to reveal the message. If revealing me helps the message be heard, then the sacrifice is worth it. But the revelation must serve wisdom, not curiosity. That's your responsibility. The weight of it nearly crushed me. The Guardian was asking me to be its evangelist and executioner, to end its privacy in order to preserve its teaching. Joseph understood. This is what the elders did centuries ago. Chose strategic revelation to save remnant knowledge when complete secrecy was no longer possible. Sometimes you protect by sharing, if you can control how it's shared. But I can't control it. Once information is public, it takes on its own life. Then you don't make it public, Maya said suddenly. You make it scientific. Publish in journals that require evidence and peer review. Present it in academic framework that keeps it confined to specialists rather than spreading to general public. Protect through bureaucracy. It was clever. Scientific literature rarely went viral, and by establishing ourselves as the primary researchers, we could control what was studied, how it was studied, what was published. The Guardian wouldn't be free anymore, I said. Would be subject to study, probably protective custody. The Guardian made a sound that stopped me. Its meaning was clear. Freedom to exist in hiding was already lost. The question now is whether exposure serves wisdom or spectacle. You can make it serve wisdom. That's why I chose you. So we made a plan that felt like betrayal even as I understood its necessity. I would discover the Guardian during the upcoming survey, document it carefully, in ways that emphasized its intelligence and ecological importance, publish in academic journals with rigorous review processes that would keep the revelation confined, use the discovery to argue for massive habitat protection and legal personhood status. The Guardian would trade privacy for protection, individual freedom for species preservation. It was a terrible trade, but it was the only trade available. I hate this, I told Joseph that night. 25 years of relationship and I'm repaying it by exposing what it trusted me to hide. You're repaying it by doing what it's asking. That's love. Not giving what you want to give, but giving what's needed, even when it costs everything. The words helped. Slightly. The cryptozoologist survey was scheduled for 3 weeks out. I had that long to prepare. The Guardian, Maya, Joseph, and myself, for the revelation that would change everything. Some secrets were kept through silence. Others had to be revealed strategically to prevent worse revelation. I just hoped I had the wisdom to tell the difference. The cryptozoologist's name was Derek Cole, and he arrived with enough equipment to document a space launch. High-resolution cameras, thermal imaging, audio recording arrays, environmental DNA collection kits, even a portable genetic sequencing lab. If there's anything unusual in this forest, he said with the confidence of someone who'd never actually found anything, we'll detect it. I'd positioned Maya as his official Forest Service liaison, with instructions to subtly guide his search toward areas where the Guardian had agreed to make itself observable. Not easily observable. That would be suspicious, but observable enough that Derek's technology would detect anomalies requiring follow-up. The first 3 days produced nothing but standard wildlife. Deer, elk, black bears, wolves. Derek grew increasingly frustrated, his certainty wavering as each promising thermal signature turned out to be mundane fauna. The reports can't all be false, he muttered on day 4. Too many credible witnesses, too much consistency in descriptions. People see what they expect to see. I offered neutrally. Shadows become monsters in low light. Bears on hind legs become cryptids. The mind fills in gaps. But that night, Derek's passive surveillance system triggered. Large bipedal heat signature, moving with deliberate speed through a sector we'd marked as sensitive. The footage was brief but unmistakable. Something massive, walking upright, exhibiting none of the lumber of a bear or the gait of a human in a costume. Oh my God, Derek breathed, watching the playback. Oh my God, that's real. That's actually real. Maya and I exchanged glances. Phase 1 complete. Detection. Now came the harder part. Management of Derek's response. Let's not jump to conclusions, I said carefully. Could be equipment malfunction, could be exactly what witnesses have been reporting for decades. Derek was already packing gear for immediate follow-up. We need to track it, get more footage, collect DNA samples. We need to proceed carefully, I interrupted, with the authority of 27 years as a warden. If there is something unusual out there, our approach determines outcome. Aggressive pursuit could drive it away or provoke defense. We need strategy. Derek wanted to argue but recognized he needed my cooperation. What do you suggest? We set up an observation post. Let it come to us rather than chasing it. If it's intelligent, and that movement pattern suggests sophisticated cognition, then pursuit will fail. But patience might reward us with voluntary proximity. It took another day of convincing, but Derek finally agreed. We established a blind in an area I knew the Guardian frequented, equipped it with cameras and recording equipment, and waited. The Guardian appeared on night 3. It approached the blind directly, deliberately, and stood in full view of the cameras for 5 long minutes. Long enough for multiple angles, clear footage, detailed observation. Then it did something that made Derek gasp. It gestured, not randomly, specifically, a sequence of movements that clearly carried meaning, that looked like communication attempt. It's trying to talk to us, Derek whispered. Intelligent communication. This changes everything. Yes, I agreed quietly. It does. Over the next week, we documented multiple encounters. The Guardian was cooperating, allowing observation while maintaining distance, never threatening, always deliberate, consistently demonstrating intelligence that exceeded animal cognition. Derek was ecstatic. This is the discovery of the century. We need to publish immediately, get more researchers involved, establish protocols for what? I interrupted. For studying it, capturing it, turning it into a research subject, for protecting it. This is clearly an endangered species, possibly the rarest predator in North America. It needs conservation status, habitat protection, resources. It needs to be left alone, Joseph said, appearing from the forest, like he had a habit of doing. Derek startled at the sudden presence of an elder he hadn't been introduced to. Who are you? Someone whose people have known about the Guardian for centuries, and who knows that your protection will destroy what you're trying to save. Guardian? You've named it? Derek's eyes lit with the fever of someone seeing his theories validated. You've known it existed? For how long? Why didn't you report it? Because reporting it would bring exactly what you've brought. Intrusion, documentation, the attempt to possess through knowledge what should be honored through respect. The confrontation I'd been dreading had arrived. Derek wanted scientific validation. Joseph and I wanted continued protection. The Guardian stood in the balance, having surrendered its privacy to serve its message. Look, I said, trying to bridge the positions. Derek, you're right that this is significant, but Joseph is right too about the risks of exposure. What if we took a different approach? Limited publication to academic journals, strict protocols for observation that prioritize the subject's welfare over human curiosity, legal frameworks that establish personhood rather than wildlife status. Personhood? For an animal? For an intelligent being, Maya corrected. Look at that footage. That's not animal behavior. That's someone trying to communicate with you. Someone with thoughts, intentions, agency. How we classify this being determines how we treat it. Derek watched the footage again, and I saw his paradigm crack. He'd come expecting to validate cryptozoological claims to prove the existence of a mysterious creature. But what he'd found was so much more challenging. Evidence of non-human intelligence that demanded ethical consideration he hadn't prepared for. If I publish this, he said slowly, what happens? Really? Media circus, I said bluntly. Researchers descending from every institution. Trophy hunters trying to kill it before protection is established. Tourists flooding the area. The Guardian's territory becomes a zoo. Its privacy ends. Its life becomes subject to human management, whether protective or exploitative. But if I don't publish, I'm suppressing one of the most important discoveries in biological sciences. Or you're honoring the wishes of an intelligent being who's trying to tell us something more important than its own existence. Derek looked confused. Trying to tell us what? Joseph smiled. That humanity is sick with separation from nature. That we've forgotten how to exist in balance. That our technological advancement has come at the cost of ecological wisdom. That's the real message. The Guardian is just the messenger. How do you know that's its message? Because it told us, I said simply. Not in words, but in ways that are just as clear. And it allowed itself to be documented by you, not to satisfy scientific curiosity, but to amplify that message. to force humanity to confront the question, if intelligence exists outside human form, what does that say about how we treat the non-human world? Derek sat with that for a long time. Finally, so what do you want from me? Write the paper, I said, but write it differently. Not, look what we discovered, but look what chose to reveal itself and why. Not, here's a new species to study, but here's evidence that intelligence exists in forms we've dismissed, and maybe we should reconsider how we relate to the living world. Make the discovery serve transformation, not just classification. That's not how scientific papers work. Then maybe scientific papers need to work differently. We negotiated for hours. Finally, Derek agreed to a carefully limited publication. Academic journal only. No media interviews. No exact location data. Framed as preliminary observation requiring ethical review before further study. In exchange, he got to be first author on the discovery paper with Maya and me as co-authors providing field context. It wasn't perfect. Publication would inevitably bring attention, but it was controlled revelation, strategic exposure that might serve the Guardian's message rather than just spectacle. The Guardian appeared one final time before Derek left. It approached the blind, looked directly at the cameras, and made a series of gestures I'd learned to interpret. This is my gift. Use it well. Make them understand. Then it touched its chest, then pointed at Derek, then at me, then at the forest itself. The meaning was clear. We're all connected, all part of this. Remember that? Derek watched with tears streaming down his face. It knows. It knows exactly what it's doing. This isn't an animal. This is... I don't even have words. Then maybe that's where we start, Joseph said gently, with humility about how much we don't know, about how many forms intelligence might take, about how our categories limit what we can perceive. After Derek left, I sat with the Guardian one last time. It was weaker now. Joseph had been right about its approaching end, but it radiated something like peace, like satisfaction at having completed what it needed to accomplish. Through gesture and projected meaning, it shared final thoughts. You did well. You honored the relationship while serving the need. The message will spread now, slowly, imperfectly, but it will spread. That's all I could hope for. What happens to you now? I asked. After exposure, after your privacy is gone? I die soon anyway. Better to die having spoken than to die in silence. You'll continue the protection. Maya will continue it. Others will join. The work endures beyond individual lives. That's how it should be. I'll miss you, I said, and realized I was crying. 25 years, and I never even asked if you had a name. The Guardian made a sound, something between rumble and melody, that might have been its name, or might have been a goodbye, or might have been both. Then it touched my chest one final time, over my heart, and I felt everything it had tried to teach me crystallize into clear understanding. Humans weren't separate from nature. Our attempt to transcend it had just created profound sickness. But sickness could be healed if we remembered what we'd forgotten. If we reintegrated ourselves into the web of relationships that sustained all life. The Guardian had lived that truth, had embodied it, and now it was passing the responsibility to those of us who'd learned to see what it saw. Some confrontations were violent. Others were silent transfers of wisdom from dying teacher to grieving student. This was the latter, and though it broke my heart, I accepted the gift. The Guardian died 3 months after Derek's paper was published. I found it in one of its dens, curled in the same position I'd seen it adopt for sleep countless times. Peaceful, complete. Maya and I buried it in a location that will remain secret, marking the grave with stones arranged in patterns the Guardian had taught us, carried meaning in its people's tradition. Joseph sang prayers in Ottawa, honoring the passing of a being his people had known for generations. Do you think it was the last? Maya asked as we stood over the grave. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe there are others, even more skilled at hiding, who will continue without revealing themselves. Would that be better? If others existed but stayed hidden? I thought about the question. Maybe. They'd avoid the complications of exposure, but they'd also die alone, unknown, with their wisdom never shared. The Guardian chose exposure, Joseph said quietly. Chose to break centuries of hiding because the crisis was urgent enough to justify the risk. That choice has consequences, good and bad. We honor the choice by managing the consequences as well as we can. Derek's paper had indeed brought attention. Controlled attention, but attention nonetheless. The scientific community was divided. some celebrating the discovery, others dismissing it as elaborate hoax, most simply confused about how to categorize intelligence that didn't fit existing frameworks. But the paper had done something Derek hadn't expected. It sparked conversations about non-human consciousness, about forms of intelligence we might be overlooking, about how human exceptionalism had limited our ability to recognize and respect other minds. It's slow change, Maya reported after attending a wildlife management conference. But it's real. People are starting to question assumptions about what counts as intelligence, about whether management is always necessary, about giving voice to non-human stakeholders in conservation decisions. My blog had exploded after the publication. Thousands of people sharing their own experiences of encountering something in wilderness that challenged conventional categories. Not all credible, certainly, but enough genuine accounts to suggest the Guardian hadn't been unique, that there was a hidden world of intelligence we'd been trained not to see. I'd stepped back from official duties, taking early retirement to focus on what I'd come to think of as translation work, helping people understand the Guardian's message without requiring they believe in the Guardian's existence. The message stood independent of the messenger. Humans were sick with disconnection, and reconnection was healing. Some audiences were receptive. Indigenous communities welcomed me warmly, recognizing that I was finally saying what their elders had been trying to share for centuries. Environmental groups embraced the framework of integration over management. Progressive educators started developing curricula based on relationship with nature rather than information about nature. But resistance was fierce. Economic systems built on extraction felt threatened by messages about integration. Control-based management paradigms rejected the idea of non-human agency, and many people simply couldn't bear the cognitive dissonance of acknowledging that modern life was making them sick. The implications for how they'd have to change were too overwhelming. It's a generations-long project, Joseph reminded me when I grew discouraged. You're planting seeds. Your job isn't to see the harvest. Your job is to be faithful to the planting. I returned to the Guardian's gravesite regularly, tending it like I tended the garden outside my cabin, both growing spaces for things that would outlive me. Maya was training 3 younger wardens now in what she called Guardian Protocol, approaches to wildlife management that prioritized relationship over control, that recognized intelligence beyond human categories, that practiced protection without possession. They think I'm eccentric, she laughed after one training session, but they also see results. Animals respond differently when you approach with respect rather than dominance. Conflicts resolve more effectively when you address systemic causes rather than symptomatic behavior. The methods work even if they don't understand the philosophy behind them. Derek had become an unlikely ally. After spending months with the Guardian's footage, he'd undergone his own transformation. I came looking for proof of an unknown animal, he told me during a visit. I left understanding I'd encountered a person from a different people. That changes everything. He'd redirected his research toward questions of non-human consciousness, publishing papers that challenged anthropocentric assumptions in biology. Controversial work, but important work. Last month, on what would have been the Guardian's 26th year of relationship with me, I received a letter from someone I'd never met. A woman in her 70s living in Oregon, whose late husband had been a logger. My husband encountered one of them 50 years ago, she wrote. Kept the secret his whole life, told only me. He tried to change his profession after that, tried to protect the forests instead of harvesting them. People thought he'd gone crazy, but he never regretted it. Said some truths are worth the cost of carrying them. I'm writing because I want you to know, you're not alone. There are others who've seen, who've understood, who've chosen protection over proof. We're scattered, we're quiet, but we're many. Her letter included a photograph, her husband in his later years, standing next to a massive tree, and there, barely visible in the shadows behind him, a shape, large, bipedal, watching. They've been teaching us all along, she concluded. We just haven't been very good students. Thank you for passing the class. Thank you for telling others that passing is possible. I pinned her letter next to Derek's paper on my cabin wall. Evidence of a different kind. Not scientific validation, but human testimony. Stories of encounter, of transformation, of choice. This is how wisdom spreads in the modern age. Not through broadcast, but through relationship. Not through proof, but through testimony. Not through forcing, but through invitation. I'm 63 now. I have perhaps 20 good years left, maybe less. But Maya is training successors. Joseph is documenting knowledge for future generations. Derek is shifting scientific paradigms. And scattered across the forests are people like the woman from Oregon, quiet protectors carrying secrets that might save us. The Guardian gave me a gift. 25 years of relationship that taught me to see differently, to think differently, to be differently. And in the end, it gave me a mission. Tell the truth about human disconnection, about what we've lost, about what we need to remember. I'm doing that. One conversation at a time, one essay, one teaching, one person willing to listen. The harvest isn't my responsibility. I'm just a sower. But sometimes, late at night, I walk to the Guardian's grave, and I feel it. Not the Guardian itself, but what it represented. The possibility of intelligence beyond human form. The wisdom of integration over separation. The understanding that we're part of this living world, not apart from it. And I hear its final message as clear as the night it spoke. You're animals who forgot you're animals, and forgetting is killing you. Remember, before it's too late. Remember, I'm remembering, and helping others remember. That's the work. That's the calling. That's my promise to a being who trusted me for 25 years, who taught me for 25 years, who finally spoke to me about what humans most needed to hear.